welcome to my channel today. This is part 2 of our series. Today we're going to talk about what bike direction we're going in. So I'm going to go over a couple of things that you're going to have to ask yourself, and that way there we can steer you towards what bike eventually. So I would suggest probably just writing down some of these things. So the first thing we're going to ask ourselves is, what are we going to use the bike for? A lot of people just get the bike, they pedal around the neighborhood. So pretty much, any bike would probably do at that point, as long as you fit on it. That's another story. But if you're going to take this bike and go on the street, or if you want to do rail trails, there's some different things that or both. I use mine on both. I do have bikes set up for the rail trail. I have them set up for the street. But they can both go on both for the most part. But like I said, one is better than the other. The tires on them, if you're not going to go on a rail trail or dirt roads or whatever, then you're going to want a street tire on that thing. You're not going to want this thing with knobbies and it's growling down the road, and half these bikes come with knobbies. So just a consideration. So the other thing is, do you plan on throwing it in your car and taking it off to some places, some destinations that you want to ride around? Because if you do, you got to be aware of the weight of these things. So, that's something. There's folding bikes. We'll get into that too. But this is not something you're going to, even buy a rack that you can put on the back of your car, off the trunk. Those things aren't going to work for one of these e-bikes, guys. So you've got to buy a hitch-mounted rack. So you have to have a 2-inch receiver on your car, trailer hitch. So keep that in consideration. If you have a hatchback or something like that, you may want to look at a folding bike. And those are usually in a 20-inch version and not a 26-inch version. So, these are all things we need to ask ourselves. How are we going to use the bike? So again, jot down what you think you're going to be doing with the bike. And when I go over the different bike styles and explain things, you can check off the box. Hey, that bike was consideration because it checks my boxes. All right, the second thing is, how much do you want to spend on the bike? Because, it's like from 0 to infinity on these things. So most of them are under the $2,500 range for a decent bike. And don't get scared, oh my God, I didn't want to spend that much. So we can get a really nice bike for around $1,000 also. So, you can spend less on a bike. I kind of don't recommend spending less, but it depends on what you need it for, I guess. So, figure out what your budget is so that we start looking at bikes, you can judge from there. So the third thing is the weight of the bike. You got to know that these things are, a light bike is 60 pounds. Now, you can get them lighter than that, but they're really small bikes and relatively underpowered, but that might be what you want. I don't know. So that's, questions we have to ask ourselves. So the size of the bike also. So back to the weight for a second. Most of these bikes are sitting right around the 80-pound range. Just be aware of that. So that's why I'm saying, especially if it's, if I'm talking to a husband and a wife that plan on getting 2 of these things, you're not going to throw them on a trunk rack on the back of your car. It's not going to happen. So you've got to go with that hitch mount if you're going to carry these around, or you can get a folding bike. And there's some out there that are really nice that you can fold. They're 20-inch bikes, and you can actually put them in a tote and slide them into your car. I've done it myself. I own a couple of 20-inch bikes. The style of the bike also. So you've got, different size bikes, obviously, 26, 20-inch. That's usually the range on these bikes. There are some 28s out there that I think there is. Not sure. You don't see them around. And so you've got to decide, do I want the big bike? Do I want the smaller bike? I drive both, guys. They're both great. Really, drivability-wise, there's not a big difference. Bigger wheeled bikes aren't as nimble. They don't turn as quick. So if you're going to buy a bike that you're planning on just riding around the neighborhood, you might want a 20-inch bike. There's 24-inch bikes out there And a 24 is like, I think, the perfect bike, and these manufacturers just start putting them out there. Sooner or later, they're going to wake up and go, hey, we should do 24-inch bikes. Like I said, there are a couple manufacturers out there doing the 24s. They're in a frame style, though, that I don't particularly like myself. That's why I've never got one. I've never seen a 24-inch bike like in a conventional type bike. I think there is one manufacturer that might have them. But anyways, so you want to decide, what size bike you're going to get. And now you also want to decide what style bike. So again, they make different bikes and, different bikes for different folks. So if you've got some disabilities, or if you're short a person or whatever, you might want to think about a step through. I have all step through bikes right now. I have a step over bike coming. So, and I have different reasons why I got that bike, but it's about the style. So if you want a conventional looking bike, and not a girl's bike, they're not called girls' bikes anymore. They're step throughs. So you've got to decide on that. You got to decide, if you want. They make different ones. They have a moped style one that kind of looks like a moped or a mini bike type thing, and and those tend to have a seat that's non-adjustable, and those are better for people probably that aren't planning on doing a lot of pedaling, because the pedaling aspect of that can be a little awkward and difficult, and the seats tend to not be that comfortable. So just be aware of that. I think if you were had a thought of getting one of those, I would suggest going to a bike store and trying it out before you make the decision on that. I'm not saying they're bad. They're just as good as any other bike, and some people like them. I'd like to try one. I don't think I'm going to go buy one, but if I ended up getting one, I would probably get out there and enjoy it. You now have to decide on your motor type. Okay, there's two types of motors out there. It's a hub motor and it's a mid-drive. Now the mid-drive bike is something that I would recommend if you haven't been on a bike in a while, you don't know if you're really, going to enjoy this or whatever. I would suggest steering away from the mid-drive. The mid-drive is a much more bikey feel. It's like being on a conventional bike. Your pedaling output is going to equal your speed on these. So you've got to keep that in mind. You also have to shift this thing. It's just like a standard transmission on a car. If you come up to a stop sign and you're in 7th gear, you're probably going to blow that thing up trying to take off. The chain is not going to want to turn that sprocket on, that low gear, and you can do some damage there. So these are much more maintenance bikes that you're going to have to put some maintenance into, because there is some wear and tear on the chain and the sprocket and your gears on the back. Like I said, it's a much more bikey feel. Your true bike guys, they love these things, and I have one. I love it for different situations. So they're very good. But it's you have to be aware of that. I see so many of these mid-drives going up for sale because people did not realize what they were buying. So again, it's like a standard transmission, guys. You got to put more effort into it. You're going to get more exercise with it. And if you have a leg injury or a knee injury or something like that, you're not going to want this bike. You're going to want to go with a hub motor. I would suggest, like I said, most people that I'm talking to go with a hub motor. And there's different sizes of those hub motors, and it all depends on what you're going to do with the bike. So that goes back to what I want to do with the bike question. The other thing is the throttle. Do you want a throttle? Most of these e-bikes come with throttles nowadays, so this isn't even an issue. But they do make them without, if you go in there and you don't know what you're doing, and you end up buying a bike with no throttle, you get it home and you go, wait, where's the throttle? So you got to be aware that not all bikes come with throttles. There's also twist throttles and there's thumb throttles. And I prefer a thumb throttle, but I don't use my throttle that much. I only use my throttle to take off, and I use my throttle to get going on a hill. If I've stopped at a stop sign and I'm on a hill, I hit that throttle to get going pretty much every time. It's about the only time I use that throttle. The rest of the time I'm pedaling, and the pedaling with the assist is pushing me along. So you got to decide on that. You got to decide for the most part if you want a twist throttle or thumb throttle. Twist throttles, I would suggest if you're planning on using your throttle all the time, you're going to want a twist throttle, guys, because when you're going to turn that thing and you're going to be able to just hold your hand there, and it's going to be much more natural than trying to hold down a thumb throttle thing. So again, if you're going to use your throttle, get a twist throttle. They also come on right side, left side, and it's all up to the bike you get. The other thing is, what options do you want on the bike? Because these things come, all different ways. For the most part, they all come with, fenders and a rack and all that, but that doesn't mean that they all do. So you've got to figure out what you want on them. A lot of guys, they don't want the fenders, and they end up tearing them off. And, me, I don't want to get mud all over me. Even with the fenders on it, you're going to probably get mud on you if you're going on the rail trails and it's wet out there. Do you want suspension on the bike? Some have rear suspension, most have front suspension, but some have no suspension. So it's a consideration. If you get a 4-inch tire, it's not so much of a consideration because that tire is going to absorb more of the bumps. So the wider the tire, the better on the bumps it is. But it's also got a lot more friction because it's wider. It's making more contact with the road. It's probably a little bit safer because it's got more, contact with the road, but it's a lot more to pedal too. So, all considerations to take in. The brakes. Do you want, hydraulic brakes or cable pull brakes? So that's a question you got to ask yourself. But more and more of these bikes are coming with hydraulic brakes, and that's the way to go. Is hydraulic. It's the best brake out there, but I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the cable brakes either. They do need more adjustment, stuff like that, and they don't work as well, but they can work very sufficiently. So if your bike is a cheaper bike and it has the cable pull brakes, don't worry about it. Just keep them adjusted all the time. So, and the other thing that I want you to think about is storage. Where are you going to store this thing? Because, again, it's relatively an 80-pound object that's 5 feet long, and depending, whether it's 20 inch or 26, it's still a big bike. The other thing about these bikes is they come in class 2 for the most part. So just briefly, the classes on these bikes is class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 1 is pedal assist only, no throttle. So you would not have a throttle on that bike. Your pedal assist will bring you up to 20 miles an hour, and then the motor will stop and you're on your own. A class 2 bike has a throttle that will bring you to 20 miles an hour. It also has pedal assist will bring you to 20 miles an hour. Your class 3 bike, which you can override in your software, which is through your screen, on most bikes, not all bikes can go to class 3. That's a question you'd have to ask. But once you override that to class 3, this bike can go up to 28 miles an hour, and then the motor cuts out. It will only go to 20 miles an hour on the throttle. It's not always the case though, but the law says it, that's what it's supposed to do. But some of these bikes are coming, they will go to 28 with throttle. None of my bikes do, but I know they're out there. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that, and now we're going to just move on. Thanks.